The WESTER Report.
People are so confident in what they know. But most of what they know, they cannot prove themselves. They inherited it, they repeated it, they trusted a teacher, a screen, a system, a headline, a textbook, a voice with authority. And then they called it knowledge. That is how strong delusion works. It does not always feel like madness. Sometimes it feels like confidence. Sometimes it sounds educated. Sometimes it has charts, degrees, institutions, consensus, and a crowd of people mocking anyone who questions it. But confidence does not make something true. A crowd does not make something true. An expert does not become God because people stopped testing. The serpent did not begin by forcing Eve. He began by challenging the word. Did God really say? That was the pattern. Get man to doubt God, then trust another voice. Israel did it with false prophets. They wanted smooth words. They wanted peace declared over rebellion. Ahab had hundreds of prophets telling him what he wanted to hear. But one true prophet stood against the crowd. And when Christ came, the religious experts knew the scrolls, but missed the word standing in front of them. That is the danger. You can know what a system taught you and still not know truth. You can defend a foundation without ever testing whether it can stand. The Bereans were called noble because they searched the scriptures daily to see whether those things were so. That is not blind rebellion. That is hunger for truth. So ask yourself, what do you actually know? And what are you only defending because someone else told you it was settled? Strong delusion is not just believing a lie. It is loving the lie because it protects the life you do not want Christ to correct. Truth does not fear being tested. False foundations do. Come to Christ. Let him break the borrowed certainty and give you truth that actually stands.
Hello, good evening and welcome to another Webster Report on this Sunday, the 5th of July, 2026, which would have seen me mum and dad, bless them if they were still here, seeing the 57th wedding anniversary. And who, you know, they taught me a lot without me actually knowing it at the time. My mum was the academic and the business acumen. My dad was the thinker and the grafter. And those two things combined put me on a path with thinking and how I was to react to words and things like that showed me this legal system. exposed it absolutely wide open. That there was no pointing it out to people, because it had to be wrong, because other than that, their life was wrong. They were doing things wrong. And people don't like to be told and understand that they've been doing things wrong in their lives. None of us do. But the factor is, we've been groomed by the best liars that we've ever known, which are normally our parents, because that's where we get our first informative things from. And we've built our lives built on those foundations, and we don't understand the traumas carried through from both parents to the child, bringing on emotions, all that kind of stuff. We never even scratched those surfaces. You know, my dad said, you know, it's being a man, you've got to give up on your dreams because you've got to have a family and work hard and do all this stuff. You find that that's not quite right, and it's a bit of a lie that tends to shape the foundations. So it's important that we understand where we're getting our information from. Let's be honest. Why do you crap in your toilet and drive your car? Because your mum told you, that's a toilet, that. What do I do in that, mum? Well, you pee and crap in it. And that's a car. You can drive places in it. Drive, yeah, it moves. So that can be explained, but you'd think, oh, well, that must be true. So when everybody does something, you automatically think it's true, and there's no need to investigate. And that's where, shall we say, the devil is in that detail. Good evening, Alex. How are you doing? Don't forget you're muted.
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, interesting introduction there, Paul. Interesting also that I'm going to turn this into a bit of a joke. So we've got Taylor on. He's been on from the beginning, so he's been Swift. And Taylor Swift got married. Taylor Swift got married. It had to be done because once I realised,
I've got to interject. What a segue!
Once I realised that Taylor was on earlier, then I realised it was Swift, and then you were talking, and I thought there was a connection here because I saw earlier that I didn't know. I just saw it randomly that Taylor Swift had got married, and then I saw this other thing with these women, and it was like there's a group called the Swifties. And this bunch of women were there, and this set up like it's almost like this cult to Taylor Swift, and they were all there like, you know, it was just like a background shot. You could see them all singing, but like they were raising their hands as if it was like a charismatic worship service. And I looked at it, and I thought to myself, so here we go, and this is resonating with things that I've been exploring and what I'm writing about at the moment about our ecologies, and I think that's one of the reasons that explains what's going on in the world, because yeah, we can say that it's because people are dumb, because they want to say believe in consensus reality and they're lazy. But I think there's something that happened before that we often miss, which is that we used to be embedded in ecologies that worked. And the problem is when those ecologies stop working, we still end up mimicking some of those aspects externally. So for example, when I saw the Swifties, I'm thinking, well, it's like some charismatic church with people raising their hand, praising Jesus, but they've just made Taylor Swift central. So the desire to worship is coming out in a different way, in a charismatic church context where presumably the theology is more accurate than making Taylor Swift central. And what does that tell you? There's something in our ecologies that seeks to worship. There's something within humanity that wants to come together and acknowledge and exalt in transcendence, that which transcends our individual self. One of them we would naturally call, from a theological point of view, idolatrous and clearly misaligned. But it does make you think whether the charismatics, when they get into that form of spirituality, whether in fact then, you know, it's real because they've got the doctrine right, or it's just as fake as the other ecologies, because it seems to just be expressing a basic human need. Maybe it's a basic human need for visibility, for togetherness. You see it in football matches, people put the same shirt on. They turn it into a religion where they go home and away, some cases. And you're thinking, so Emil Durkheim spoke about this in the elementary forms of the religious life in the early 20th century, and he studied totemic ancestor worship amongst Aboriginals in Australia. And also, you've got it in Native American cultures as well, where the clan gather around the family totem and they revivify social sentiments. They make them come back to life by gathering around the totem pole. That's a bit like a church worship service where people come together once a week to recreate spiritual sentiments through emoting. And it's interesting because I think that, you know, the point where you started off is connected, because people do want simple lives where they can just kind of live on autopilot, get through the week, survive the day, have some good experiences in there. It's like a basic human need that people have for, I don't know if you call it a simple life, because there's lots of crap going on in the world today which makes our lives complicated. But people seem to want the easy because so much for them is difficult. And in that sort of cauldron, we can look at how our ecologies have become deranged and how people have just turned into sort of ritualistic people trying to be an emotional junkie in order to feel good about themselves. And it just looks to me like lots of forms of worship are just about feel-good factors, coming together, singing songs, which you can do at a Taylor Swift concert as well. So for me, what's interesting is all of this stuff is connected. And the point is, when we lose the centre, when we lose the real glue, the real cohesion, some false or counterfeit equivalent's going to come in, which perhaps it resembles very closely what we might think is worship. But maybe it's not worship at all. Who knows?
Well, what about when I've been stood in a Slayer concert? That is quite satanic. The lyrics are satanic. The lyrics are based on rituals and stuff like that. They are then doing the hand signs of throwing the horns. You could have anything from 2,000-3,000 up to 20,000 people throwing that energy, and the music blasting back. I've heard so many frontmen talk about the energy that they put out, and the crowd, when it comes back, it becomes a flowing energy. That intention, that coming together, all that energy at once from that venue, feeding the spiritual realm, that all that power. This is why it's interesting to me that if you can be humble enough to understand where you've got your information from, understand that the foundation might not be even cement, never mind stone. It's that you've got to be able to be humble enough to say, hey, there's something not right here. But as you said, so many people are happy with the apathy of, hey, I'm all right. I've got some stuff from shop. You've got me shopping in. Football's on. I've got my beers. Everything's all right. I've got day off tomorrow. But all those things, and it's all about this world. We never worry about what happens after this world. And society has said it doesn't matter now. Just distraction. Just be entertained. Don't worry about what happens after this world. And it's so subtle. Now, all the churches were subtly moved, subtly changed. So again, we get elders, we get, whatever you would call the hierarchy through these establishment structures. Some say elders, some say archbishops, whatever. If to join that establishment, to go to those churches, to preach in those churches, you must pass their tests, preach what they say. Then if they've got that wrong, then everybody's going to get it wrong, and you are teaching falsely, even if you believe it to be true. So what does God do with that? If you are running up and down stage, stamping on dollar bills, shouting money, 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 that's not very godlike. So he must know that that's not godlike. So he's choosing to lead these people astray. He's one of the wolves that are trying to lead the sheep away. But you've genuinely got people who are, especially in local, regional levels, you've got people who do have passion for Jesus and believe, but they're not teaching people that. I was talking to somebody the other day where they said they got saved early on and they went to church, they had the Bible, but they didn't have a Bible. And then it was like a few nice things said, sing and clap your hands and praise the Lord, do a prayer, and then off you go for the week. There's no pastoral stuff, no nothing. So bit by bit, because she didn't have a Bible, she didn't know what Bible to get, she didn't have people to ask. Bit by bit, even though she was, as she said, she was saved because she understood it, bit by bit over the years, she slid. She said, I kept talking to God though, but she'd slid. Now that shows that it's somewhere in that establishment, at that point as an 18-year-old, if she'd have seen the truth, heard the truth, been given a Bible, and even spoken to her about what the basics was it to get her going, that would have all changed her life. I said that if I'd have been an 18-year-old, if I'd have got saved at 18, knowing what I know now, because when I was saved 10 years ago, understanding it and then joining all these dots, it would have definitely changed my life, Alex. I would have stayed married. I would have, but what would I have done? How could I have found this unless I've lived through what I've lived through? And I think we make all these decisions, and wherever it is, God's got a plan for all of us, and wherever He wants you, He's going to lay the path for you to get there. You're going to decide how difficult that path is, but at the end of the day, you may not get to the end of the path that God has planned for you because you're distracted. It's the Pilgrim's Progress. Hey, get on the other side of the wall. The wall goes the same way, but it's a clear field. It's not all rocky like this. And then the wall splits while they're talking and walking, and they've gone off. And it's the subtlety of that. That's what worries me about people being in these churches and not understanding what is in Scripture, like we had last week during the debate in the chat room. There's a certain thing that you've got to put in this. It's about a relationship. You can't have a relationship with God through a church. You can keep saying, He says the church, it's a church. That's not the understanding. It's about your relationship, then fellowship. That is, the church is within you, the kingdom is within you. You become a fellowship, the Holy Spirit joins everybody. But to go and sit with people who don't understand that, yet they believe they're saved, I can't judge that, Alex. We've had that conversation many times, that we can only listen to what people say and see what happens. I know I was saved and born again because of how it changed me, how I thought, how I did. When I think about the things I used to do and I have gone and done, I can think about it, but straight away I thought, no, I don't want to do that. I couldn't have stopped doing it because it was normal life. Everything, work hard, pay your bills. I wouldn't have never stopped paying my bills until I realised, hang on a minute, we're not meant to. That's nuts. So I'll have to keep checking that. Then you realise if everybody's doing something that's wrong, something has happened somewhere. Something's been moved. Now people are like, there's a lot of people in the court system shouting check at the minute for a chess term. They're all getting into positions. You've got Andy Burnham now, who's talking about scrapping council tax and replacing it. Why do you want to scrap it, Andy? Well, it's because of all these liability orders that a judge can't decide what. There's no authority. Where's the authority here? Are you sure there's no? The judge is asking the people who are in court. There's no sure, because they can't say there is a liability order, because that would have to be proved under authority. When they're acting under commercial authority, if they want to prove their authority, they're going to have to say what jurisdiction, which will then bring up the jurisdiction and the title of what. Why is that? Why are you presuming that property is commercial? You're acting commercial. You're trying to do something with this property. that's clearly not commercial. It's got to be that title. So all of a sudden, everybody's eyes are on what we've done. Because up until that title being cleared, they're doing that wrong, Alex.
Yeah. Well, I mean, coming back to where you started there about people going into churches and just following what they're told, doctrines and so on, and not having access to Bibles, not being encouraged to have them. That's about what you'd call discipleship or formation. Now, to me, doctrines are a little bit like badges. And it's like if you've got, you go down to the doctrine shop and you get your correct doctrines, put them in your supermarket trolley, the shop trolley, and you buy them all, and then you wear them like a badge.
Right. I was just gonna say, can I check whether you said badges or badgers? And I thought, what have badges got to do with this? But it makes sense now.
Yeah, badges. So you get your badges from the shop, and the badges are doctrines, and then you wear your badges, you wear your doctrines. And when you see somebody else, like if you go to church on a Sunday, you're wearing a suit, you're not wearing jeans with a hole in them and coming casually dressed. Ah, right, I can see you've got the right badge on. You support the right doctrines. Now, what does that do? It spawns and swims around in tribalism. So what happens is those people that don't wear the badges or don't, aka they don't have the right doctrines, they're not allowed entry, or they're scorned, or somebody tries to convert them into wearing the right badge. And then, of course, that whole system is self-perpetuating. The whole ecology becomes about acquiring the correct badges, aka the right doctrines, then turning up at the place where you wear the badges to feel okay about the fact that you've got the right identity now, that you're part of the right tribe. When you look at it, you see that not just in churches and faith, Christian faith, other faiths, you see it right across culture. You see it in football, you see it in politics, all the stuff we've seen recently around the by-election in Makerfield. That was all about identity related. All about identity-related stuff, all about picking your tribe, all about trying to stop the other tribe that you don't like getting in. And that's basically seems to sum up the ecological conditions that most people live in. So whether it's connected with, politics or, the Swifties or whatever, it looks as if there's something vital about people having a sense of belonging, which is connected on some levels to having an identity, which is a form of security. And yet, you had John the Baptist and Jesus both saying when they turned up on the scene, shaking up the Jewish establishments, do not presume to say to yourselves, we wear the Abraham badge. We have Abraham to our father. Don't let that be a claim, because out of these very stones, God is able to raise up children to Abraham. So it was going on back then, a form of identity politics through religion. My dad's better than your dad. This doctrine's better than that one. I'm wearing the right badge. And so, again, that's where when Jesus said, not everyone who says to me on that day, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he does the will of my Father is in heaven. And all these mighty acts, I never knew you. So we've got a very clear distinction where the radical teaching of Jesus and the radical reality of discipleship is that it's not popular. It's not about getting a particular badge, because the badge that you would acquire if you're following Christ is one, that's going to get you persecuted. And most people are not up for that. They don't want an identity or a model of success. It's based on weakness, suffering, being a servant of all, in the sense that Jesus talked about. And that just doesn't compute for people. People want to stand out. They want to be visible. They feel that if they aren't recognised in a particular way, that they're invisible and therefore they don't exist. And they experience ego collapse. And therefore they try everything to buttress themselves. And again, when people do that, whether it's badges, uniforms, tattoos, whatever it is, people try to make themselves into something that can be recognized and put into a particular box to get a sense of belonging. And, you know, obviously, sometimes people criticize Christianity and say, oh, it's a load of made up rubbish. Well, then ask yourself why a bunch of guys who decided to say, actually, I could be risking death here. It might not end up too well for me if I acknowledge I'm a part of this guy's club. And yet they insisted that their identity would be found in allegiance to him that had been built up over 3 years. And I think that's the fundamental difference. If you look at one of them, if you're one of the Swifties, it's glamorous. You're visible, you feel seen, you feel alive, it's immortal. You're immortal, you're feeling the love, you know, or you're going to, you know, hang out with the New Agers and the hippies, banging the drums, going to a gong bath, you know, singing your kumbayas or whatever, and generating your intense feelings. You know, there's so much of that stuff that happens out there where spirituality now is packaged and sold, and people are sold an easy, a gimmicky sort of faith, and the best that you get is some kind of religious devotion through attendance. You know, we attend. We go every week.
Well, is that
And
enough?
well, obviously, for those people it is. It seems to be missing the heartbeat of what true faith was always about. Like the prophet spoke about, a heart of flesh, not a heart of stone, a living relationship with God. He said, I want you to be my people. But again, it's no surprise really, you know, if that's the authentic truth and there's a counterfeiter who hates human beings and wants to see us corrupted, it's no surprise really that somebody leading us astray would want us to be on that broad path of just going through the motions, just doing as little as possible, just having the external appearance of being religious.
Is it enough, Alex? Is it enough to believe that what Jesus did is the truth and Jesus was God in flesh? Is it enough to believe that and then not read the Bible every day, not have that one-to-one relationship and just go to church once a week? Maybe go through the week and do a bit of cleaning, because I've known people who were, you know, fervently Catholic and they would describe themselves as Christian, and yet they didn't act always like Christian, you know. So we get stuck with this terminology again, because if you're Catholic, if you're Protestant, if you're Methodist, if you're Jehovah's Witness, if you're Mormon, you're going to say I'm Christian. So how could we be, I don't know if you could say certain, but how can people be hopeful that that is enough? You know, it's not enough for me. I have to, you know, I've got to eat the meat and potatoes. The milk's good, but I want more. Is it feasible? You know, because as we discussed, we don't believe that the Word of God is just black and white. When you read the Scripture, there's so much there that isn't taught, that isn't spoken about, and that's the conversation that we try to get going. Do you think there's a discrepancy? Is that a stumbling block for people?
It comes back to the culture within which we're formed. We've lost that aspect that you had in Judaism for all its faults. People wearing phylacteries and mezuzahs, little things around the containers, you know, like on a necklace that they would open up when they had a spare moment, pull out a scroll and read scripture, inscribe it on the lintels and doorposts, constantly refresh yourself with the memory of God, because we're forgetful and we're led by our senses. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Beatitudes, blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. I mean, I think hunger and thirst, you get the impression, don't you? Kind of a ravening hunger, a deep thirst, a deep desire that isn't easily quenched. That's going to drive you. It's going to drive you towards the food, to the drink. Well, what is the food and drink? God is clearly central to that. So if people don't have that impulse in them, and they look to the left, they look to the right, they go, well, everyone else seems to be doing this. I guess that's what you do.
Let me ask you like this then, because I didn't, you know, you were saved early days, whatever age you were, in 87, but you obviously strayed. When you went back, What was the difference? How did you know to be different? Why was the conviction stronger?
When I kind of came back again.
Yeah, because let me. You knew the truth at 18,
Yeah.
but then you veered off. What if you never came back? What if you stayed there but still believed? Is that enough?
No.
How do we know that? Where can we point to say this is what is your requirement?
Yeah. Well, these are the really tough questions that we wrestle with all the time, because the gospel in many churches is portrayed as you just go out, you hand out some tracts, you get a bunch of people to believe the objective truth about reality, and reality isn't just what you experience now, it's what you believe came before you right at the beginning. It's about where it's all going to end up, which is basically a cosmological framing. It's a story arc within which we play a part. Now, if we believe that is a cosmic story where God entered into his creation after the fall, and that there are entities that hate his creation, hate us and hate him, then there's a cosmic battlefield raging. And the stakes are pretty high. You know, when people look at wars today, they see casualties, deaths. You know, it's not as if a war is a walk in the park. There's a lot at stake. So, you know, if you're in a battlefield, you know, are you participating? I mean, you might be a stretcher bearer. You know, there's a bunch of different roles in the army, but you're going to be playing your part, taking seriously that, in fact, it is a war. Now, if you just decide to down tools, you know, if you left the army as a deserter, you could be court-martialed. So, you know, no one's saying it's pleasant that it's a battle, that it's an ongoing war of attrition, but that seems to be the reality, and that there will be a redemption, and that those who persevere to the end will be saved. Not those who kind of said, well, I got my ticket, I went into the performance, it was a 3-hour show, but after about 30 minutes, I just went home. I wasn't feeling it. Well, you got up out your seat, you decided you no longer wanted to participate in the show. And if you believe that you took your ticket home with you, or you'd bought a program, you could go home and remind yourself, hey, I went to that thing once, I left after half an hour. Like, if you believe that that is the full experience, I think you're taking a risk. Just because you bought a ticket, it just does not mean that at the end you're necessarily going to be there. You've got to make the choice.
What if it feels right? What if I know the truth and it feels right to do things like this?
Yeah, then well, you're in a form of difficulty there, because how would you be able, like, if all the fish are swimming along the river, we do know that salmon go back and spawn, don't they? And they do incredible feats to go back up and die, actually. It takes a Herculean effort. It's much easier to swim with the currents and the way all the other fishes are going. So, you know, if you don't understand from the beginning that there was a cost, there was a price that was paid, and that you yourself might bear some of that cost, and that it might be a challenge, and you just want it easy, I would suggest that you've not been given the right message in the first place.
That's exactly what the start of this show is about, the foundation. So I didn't get anything to do with religion, thankfully, because my mum and dad weren't religious. But obviously, being at a Church of England school, they taught scriptures. So I went home and asked questions. My mum could answer, you know, the repeated stuff that I could understand. But, you know, it wasn't real. We don't know. You know, it's just what we're taught. So my mum was telling me, well, that's what they taught us. Well, you know, I'd have been saying, well, you've been taught to pay bills, Mum. But that's when you in the shop, when in the business, in the pub, in the shops, that's where you should be paying. But here, you're different. You should act differently. That would have been a conversation. But it's because my mum's taught me to ask those questions. That's what's dug all this up. And when you start digging at that foundation, you realise that there is no rock there. There's nothing there. It's just all, well, what have I been doing all my life? Because I made that decision because it was based on this, but that wasn't quite true now. So I then made a decision based on a falsity, just like every trauma from small to large has created a personality that we call us, me. You know, who are you? My name's Paul. Yeah, but who are you? Oh, I'm a prison officer. I'm a father. I'm a this. You know, it's fundamental that when you are born again and it's, well, who are you? And you're like, who am I? What was meant for me? Because what I've done was obviously not meant for me because it's been based on a lie. Now, if you've got society and 3 generations teaching kids that lie, how will you change it without an intervention? You know, even God in the Old Testament said, I've had enough of all this. Every man and woman, wicked in the hearts, evil only. Oh, but Noah's all right. He's done enough. He's done out. Well, I can't do that to Noah. So you're talking about one man. This is representative of where God went. 120 years. Hey, stop doing that. It's going to rain. You're going to get judged. It's inevitable. Don't believe you. Then there's a big boat built. And God says, get in. I'm shutting it. Noah has nothing to do with it. He goes in, shuts it. Starts raining. Everybody turns up, says, Noah, let us on. Noah's got no control over that because the judgment, the door's closed. So we see it when the fulfillment of the Old Testament to the cross, where the thief right up to it is, you know, before the deal is sealed, he says, you'll be with me. He's not gone through any rituals. He's not been baptized. He's not done anything. What has he missed out on? Nothing, because Jesus said so. He doesn't want anybody to perish. So after all that stuff that that thief on that cross, all his decisions have been based on what he was born into, because we all take for granted we know the difference between good and evil, because most of us are convicted to not do bad things. But bad things according to who? If society says it's okay to do that, then it's okay to do whatever society stipulates. If you live in Europe, which is all civil law, it's all based on what men say. So you could get ridiculous with that. That's why the Bible warns about the laws written by men. Everything is done. It's now a personal relationship. It wipes the slate clean. But what are we programmed with when we come into this world? Everything that we've got this clean slate, but it's full of crap by the age of 5, Alex.
Yeah. Well, most people, again, they'll use surrogates. So, like, you see it a lot, don't you? Zeal. People become very zealous. I mean, when I think about when I first had my Christian experience, I'd done a Ouija board, and it was freaky. And I'd been a confirmed atheist because I believed in science and evolution and everything. And I looked at the church I was in, and I just thought, these lot of plastic. Now, not all of them were. I knew there were some good souls in there, but the hierarchy certainly had a lot of families passing down, being territorial, building empires, being gatekeepers. You had to marry into it. You had to learn to drive a car, pass your test at 18, get a good job. It was all middle class anchors, and that was the Holiness Church of the Nazarene. And, I gained so much from that church. I went to its theological college in Manchester, which was brilliant, fantastic formative experience, some high quality people in there, really worthwhile tradition and traditional Wesley. But the church I was in, a lot of parochial stuff, a lot of traditions and men. But when I had my experience, having come out of, this Ouija board thing that lasted several days, it totally took away all the foundations of my, call it my materialism, my seeing is believing. And I saw with my eyes, I saw that glass move. I had experiences that were freaky with a friend, my closest friend of nearly 45 years now, shared that experience with me. And, I could talk about even now, 40 years on, we could reconstruct what happened, and it was pretty mind blowing, and that changed things for me drastically. I didn't sleep without my light on for 2 years. I wouldn't go to sleep. I was reading the Bible, and I knew Matthew 1-8 verbatim. I knew loads of the Psalms verbatim. I could quote because I was simply reading so much of the Bible because I was petrified. Now, my friend, he did sleep, but he had a cat, and that was the only thing that enabled him to sleep. He had a cat called Pookie, and basically, you know, he was massively impacted as well. But he didn't stay the course. We're still great friends, but he was Christian for a while, but he fell away. But yeah. At first, therefore, I was incredibly zealous, even coming back to a church which was very suspicious of me because I started shaking up the convenient traditional order because I didn't have any of that training. I hadn't been brought up in that church. I'd been an outsider. They'd been praying for me to be saved from their perspective. Little did they know they were praying for more than they bargained for. And then
how dare you rebel against Satan?
Well, again, when I started asking questions, based on what I thought when I read the Bible, I thought what it was saying was pretty straightforward, and yet I was encountering all these traditions. I was a 19-year-old, still got adolescent views, some things very black and white, but I had loads of zeal. When I would pray, the sense of God's presence was mind-blowing, earth-shattering. I saw people saved. I saw the presence of the Holy Spirit, felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. It's incredible. And even when I've come back, I've never felt such intense experience. It was that intense. I could distinguish the difference between the experience of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. I mean, the experience of God the Father was like, whoa!
Can you put into words then? Because of those experiences, I can't. You know, my experiences are all this end. So having experienced that, having that knowing, how was it that do you think you slipped?
Because of the church. Because of the church. No, not specifically. So I'm not blaming. What I'm saying is, and this is what my whole life ever since for 40 years has been about. It wasn't that these people weren't sincere, because there was a lot of great people in there. Already, the ecology which sustains life needs a container, just like milk needs a bottle. If you've got all this liquid and no bottle to put it in, it'll spill. So the problem is, if the container, it's like when Jesus talks about putting new wine in old wineskins. He said, you don't put new wine in old wineskins, otherwise the new wine will burst the old wineskins and the wine will be lost. Now, there's a reference there also to being born again, which John's Gospel speaks about overtly, the synoptics don't, but it's a new birth metaphor. If you've had an old life that's been stretched and strained, and you put this new vital wine in it, it's going to burst those wineskins. You need new wineskins. So what he's saying is people have to be remade. But what happens over time is if you don't keep on top of that, if you just, you take your eye off the ball, and it's easy for humans to do, if they don't keep that ecology vital, it will begin to degrade, but it will still resemble, like an old tatty football shirt, from 20 years before that nobody wears anymore. But they can still identify you as a supporter, but it's not current, it's not up to date, it's getting holes in it. It's a vague echo, a vague representation of what it should still be if it was vibrant and up to date. We've got to keep ourselves up to date. So what actually happened was, because that church had been there at the time, I'd say it was formed in 1930, that one in Bolton. At this point, it's 1989. So it's been there nearly 60 years. You're about 3 or 4 generations in. They've been passing down their traditions to the kids. They're all playing the instruments, the organ, the flute. They're doing the Bible readings. They run the youth group. Over time, it just becomes life. It just becomes what they do. It just becomes stitched into the fabric of everyday existence. And when that happens, it's easy to start taking things for granted because, familiarity breeds contempt very easily. So how do you keep things fresh? Now, in theory, when I got converted, something that they prayed for, they should have really been loving that freshness, because when you mature, you're born, you're a baby. You're supposed to grow up. You're not supposed to keep crying and whinging and teasing when you're 12. You know, it's not considered age appropriate. So the only way to keep the life cycle going is to generate new believers. They come in, they keep it fresh, they bring some. But what this church was doing, they were shutting it down because they were seeing it as a threat. So they were immediately telling me.
They got angry with you because you were forcing them to question their own beliefs. You know, I remember being in a church where the pastor there had been there 35 years, and he says he was obviously delivering in Bible study pre-trib rapture. I went, but this isn't scriptural. Well, it's what we believe. It doesn't matter what you believe. Is it scriptural? If we're going to say we're Christian, that would presume to me, as it always has, that you follow what Jesus said. That's the first thing. Jesus Christ, Christian, yeah, okay, if we go with that, I should follow what he said, shouldn't I? Yeah. Then you Catholics, you go against some of the stuff he says, and you shouldn't do that. So are you Christian? The answer is obviously not. But if they want to claim to be Christian, then you've got to be a disciple or something like that, because I went straight to scripture. I've been told that I couldn't do that. I shouldn't do that because, as you said, church, this is why you fell away. But is it because of that you fell away, or is it because they couldn't shift to the truth and God went, you're not staying there, Alex?
No, well,
you might have to go off and get a few bumps and bruises, break a few bones even, but you'll come back. I'm going to let you do that. I'll let you refine yourself that way.
Well, it's neither. I mean, the thing is, it can look like that on paper, but the reality is, when a new convert comes into a church, that church should be like an incubator for a baby that was maybe even born premature, or certainly an ecosystem. It needs to provide everything that spiritual infant requires to be guided. If they're immediately being portrayed as some sort of nuisance, if they're useful. I mean, I was 19 years of age. I'm still going to have some black and white views. I don't have all the background that they've had. They should have had protocols in place to manage those types of situations. And the fact that tells you that this wasn't happening very often, even then in 1987. Not many people were coming from outside these churches. They were already decaying. When they came in and they were precautious and they were creating trouble in Sunday school, they didn't know what to do with them. A few years later, in 1997, I became a youth worker and children's worker in a Baptist church in the central Bolton. They had things up like on the windows, almost like barbed wire. It's like they were saying, welcome to our church. But a lot of them were commuting from posh estates, and it was in the middle of working class town centre Bolton. And the kids were from a lot of, lower working class families, a lot of single parent families, right, with a lot of issues, and stepdads, step-parents coming in who were violent, and they were having role models, and they were coming into church, trying to run a youth group, and they were messing about. And, in terms of the property, they were, like you do, wetting some toilet paper and throwing it at each other, and it's on the walls. And then the people who are dead precious about the church building, who believe that the most important thing is having an offering to renew the carpets, they start getting all like ministerial about it, like the Levites did in Jewish tradition. This is for the upkeep of the house of God. Who's going to pay for the flowers? Who's going to deliver them to Molly at weekend this month? And they get into all these parochial things. And I'm not saying those things don't need to happen, but as soon as you've got a building, you've got territoriality. You've got people commuting in with middle-class values who've been Christian for quite some time. They're embedded in a church where they're saying the gospel is preached and all are welcome. But every indication that you have is almost like barbed wire fences. You'd expect machine guns and turrets almost at one level, like the Great Escape. It's like a total contradiction.
That's not for me.
But that's the bizarre contradiction that you deal with. Now, how do you then bring young people through? So I'm a young person who come in from outside and managed not to alienate me. When I first went to that church, there were 4 or 5 of us mucking about. We were sat on the wall outside my house, me and these 3 girls. And we ended up going. None of the girls were consolidated. I went and I went along because I became obsessed with this one lass, and I was just going for as much as anything for a bit of a social, and to try and get involved with this lass, and that's what kept me going. And eventually, you know, but you could say it's more good luck than management, because I stuck in for bogus reasons and a sense of belonging, because I'd been bullied as a kid, and it was safer than going out like on the lash at nightclubs. I stayed long enough, met enough friends, consolidated, got involved in the culture, but I didn't believe that just by pure fluke, I ended up having that experience when I went to where it changed me. Nothing to do with the church, because I had an actual experience. Then when I came in back with an actual experience that they prayed for me to become a Christian, when I became a Christian, they didn't like what they saw, because I was rocking the boat, upsetting their apple cart. So that shows you how rare it was, because they weren't equipped to know what to do with somebody who wasn't already an insider. But that's why they were dying. And that's why, you know, churches today struggle. So that's the real reason. They didn't know how to handle me.
You said that it was your experience, not the church, right? So
Yeah.
what is the difference between your experience? Is your experience as good as somebody who's had a near-death experience, who said that they've spoke to Jesus and they've come back and now they say that they know the truth? How come? Does that mean your experience isn't as good? You know, because we've come across people with this mentality. And it's like we've always said, Alex, we're not wanting to be right. We want the truth. We're not asked about being right, but you can't say scripture's wrong and then just say cause we believe this. It doesn't work like that.
Well, it's not about the experience for me. That's what we focus on. It's about what the experience does to you. So if you see God as a God who wants to reach, who Jesus said, you know, about the shepherd who's come, there's 100 sheep, 99 are safe, one's on the hillside, he comes for the one that's lost. This seems to reveal the heart of God to seek and to save that which was lost. It would seem to me that if that's true, the experience that you have is possibly the only experience you could have had. So I know somebody who had a near-death experience who had become such a brilliant person, but completely rational, completely immune to religion because of exposure to Catholicism and Catholic ritual and the nuns and that whole draconian austere system. So the only way, because wonderful human being, but completely resistant to God because of the Catholic Church, the only way ultimately, and because of other things that were going on, was to die and come back. That was the method that Jesus used to meet her. For me, clearly, I was an atheist. Seeing was believing. That was my mantra. And I just saw what I thought were a bunch of plastic Christians playing happily families with fake plastic smiles. And I knew there were some decent people among them, but the hierarchy just seemed to me to be corrupt. So seeing was believing, and they provided no evidence. So I saw the face of evil. I saw it up close and personal. You know, that you could write a horror movie like The Exorcist on. That is so vivid, was it? So I received what I needed to receive as an experience that would force me to break through the unbelief that I had, because the experience I'd had in that church was of a type of compromised cultural Christianity, churchianity, if you like. I had no means of recognizing the real thing. And so I got a taste of the opposite. Because I'm a rationalist and I'm logical, I then reasoned immediately, well, this level of evil is incredible. If this was on the throne, the world would be far, far worse than it is, because I could see even then the world was not as bad as it is today. That generally, for all the crap, there was a lot of really good stuff. The goodness of creation was still evident. So I reasoned pretty quickly there had to be something good holding it back that was greater than it. Then it was simple. Because I had the background in the church, my first port of call was to start reading the Bible. And when I started reading the Bible, then I encountered the Jesus Christ who could say to me, you know, all the evil that you saw, I'm the remedy to that. That's the only thing that makes you safe. And I still didn't sleep for 2 nights without a light on, or until it became daylight, and read the Bible incessantly. So frightened was about what had happened. So I needed to have that experience. It wasn't near death, but it was being terrified, and I saw the dark side. So I would say it isn't so much, you know, my experience is better than your experiences. I believe that the experience that we receive, if we're called, is the experience that we need in order to get past their defenses.
I agree. It's an individual experience. Nobody can. It's like, I know I'm saved, but I can't say I know you're saved, Alex. Only you know. You and the Lord know that. So it does come down to this. This is what I'm getting at. It's an individual relationship, but it's got to have a foundation. And it's the only truth that I've found So how you can't convince anybody to leave the truth when you know it's the truth, because you've had a fair good look round, you've done your due diligence. So it was a logical understanding before anything else. But when you're dealing with many people who just, well, I believe, because it's easy to have an understanding about things and then feeling that it feels okay. And everything might be okay in your life. Everything's just plodding along. So nothing ever needs to touch on it. You know, for me to get here, I had to be put on my knees. And I think there might be a lot of other people. Taylor, are you still there, pal?
Yeah, I'm still here. Been here the whole time.
Yeah, well, I know you went to the bathroom, and I saw you come back, and I went to look to speak to you, and you muted, so I was just checking, because you could have jumped in this conversation if you'd had anything to say. But welcome to the show, mate. Thank you for coming early. Have you got any views on what we've been talking about so far?
Well, first of all, let me just say that Alex. Yeah, Alex, what you said at the start when you were talking about how people want the Swifties, talking about how they want to connect. This is that's humans are social beings. We want a place to belong. We want a place to connect. That's one of the reasons why the deep state has been trying so hard to divide people over the centuries, whether it be the women's liberation, black liberation, Muslim, etc., etc. Just piss off as many groups as you can and put them against each other, especially against the white man, so that way that you can have people be separated into groups that are much more easily controlled. They did that in Europe in the 1800s, in the 19th century, where like in 1848 or 1832, where they sparked all these Illuminati-sponsored revolutions in Europe in order to create all these smaller countries that were easily controlled and weaken the monarchies in order to create a completely parliamentarian system that is easily controlled with their thugs and these quote-unquote democracies.
Yeah.
So...
Good point, Taylor. Good analysis there.
It's like divide and conquer has always been their strategy, because when people are together, they're strong. When they're separated, they're nothing. So,
easy. Well, now that you've been introduced, I'll play that video we had a quick look at, and then pass your opinion on it, because I'm not sure when this video was, and you may have seen it, you might know, but it's interesting to see what the points that she's bringing up, because there's got to be a reason behind all this, and I'm wondering where this fits in with not just the plan that you speak of, Taylor, but what we speak of. Whereabouts does this fit in for us?
The CIA, the MI6, and the Five Eyes nations were always protecting the architecture above us, from us, okay, with our money and black budgets and no oversight. And I want to make very clear, and I've said this and I will say it again, Donald Trump can change the world by doing one thing. He can rescind the International Organization Immunity Act of 1945 that is still keeping the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, and 63 other banks from any kind of investigation, audit, or even going on their premises to this day. At the same time, the International Organization Act of 1945, to this day, also protects the United Nations, the World Health Organization, UNESCO, 76 tentacles of the United Nations. To this day, there is no jurisdiction for the United States of America in any of these protected agencies. They are part of the global infrastructure architecture built above nations, and the Dulles brothers made sure that they protected them.
Do you want to give us what's your take on that, Val?
Talking to me?
What's your yeah?
Okay, making sure. Oh, that was good. Who is that lady?
I'm not sure off this one.
Okay. I was assuming that she was
Go
like some
on.
cabinet official, but regardless, so that's what's great about what
Mel K show. It is
Mel K. Wait, you said Mel K?
Mel K, MELK.
I don't know who that is, but regardless, the point is,
well, what's your opinion on what she said? Go on.
okay, so the point is that this is you see, this kind of thing is good to see. Like, wait, hold on, let me ask you this: is that a popular video on TikTok? Like, is that a viral TikTok video or a Facebook video or anything like that?
I'm not on TikTok, mate.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So that's the whole thing. Is like, that's part of the exposure phase of what's been going on, and it's like, you know, this is something that the people have to learn about, the Five Eyes and all these international organizations that were thrust upon the world in the wake of in the aftermath of World War II. And you know, that's the craziest part. That's the thing, is like, that's what the world wars were all about: destroy the old world order, and then and then create these international organizations out of the aftermath. You know, you blow up Europe, and then you go and create all of these, and then you give people the solution of, oh, we need world government to prevent this from happening again. You know, Winston Churchill, way back right after World War II, right when the UN, I think it was 1946, he was talking about this. He was talking about how, openly with his groupies, basically saying how, you know, we need, we're gonna have a world government and United States of Europe and all that stuff. But you know, the thing is about that is that, you know, with all the exposure happening around these agencies, and you know, I've been saying this for a while now, that all these agencies have been completely defanged. You know, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the EU, the World Bank, et cetera, and that what we're seeing right now is just the replay for the public of exactly what they need to learn in order to prevent something like this from ever happening again. Because it's not enough to just say, hey, look, let me just go ahead and sign away the United Nations or sign away the NATO, etc. Because you have to have them, because the public also needs to want them gone. Because otherwise, you're going to get so much pushback. The normies are going to say, "Oh, no, these are organizations that keep us safe," and we'll just be back to where we were in another couple of decades or so. So it's kind of like what happened with Andrew Jackson in 1835 when he killed the second central bank of the United States, the Fed of its day. It wasn't just that, he was some random dude that hated the bank and killed it. No, the entire country saw how evil the bank was and wanted and was behind the idea of destroying it. And that's why for 80 years after that, until the Federal Reserve in 1913, we didn't have a central bank, even though they tried their damnedest to get it passed.
That's why, that's it. Also, with the Lincoln Greenback, that showed how effective not having that banking system works. So you're right, they saw just how evil it was. That's when Rothschild said, "I'll have a central bank or there'll be war."
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like that was one of the main reasons for the so-called Civil War, which was really an invasion from Europeans, European invaders on both sides of the country. It was to split up the country and then put a central bank in every part. And you know, there was even talk back in the day, back in those days, of even having the Northwest areas becoming their own country. So it wouldn't even have just been the North and South. No, it's just like, you know, they were trying to do the United States what they were doing in Europe. You know, splitting up creating all these smaller countries so that way they're easier to control, just like I was saying before.
So what are you saying then? The reason Trump won't repeal that act and put these people up for investigation is because of what? The reason being
because you need to because you need to, because people need to learn the lesson. They need to understand the importance of how these organizations have affected us all these years, And it's just like and also it's also not just that. It's also because you need to if you want to repeal these big organizations like NATO or the United Nations or whatever, first of all, you have to expose the deep state actors that are behind it for the public. And
Taylor, you missed my point. The repealing of the act that she mentioned, which covers any investigation, none of these people can be investigated. If Donald Trump repeals that act, the protection is gone. Now the US government, FBI, can go and investigate. But it seems to be that there's a mutual benefit from not exposing that. This is why when our politicians, like Andy Burnham saying he's going to get rid of council tax, but he's going to replace it with a land tax. Well, council tax was replaced the poll tax because people were rioting on the street because of what the poll tax was. It was another commercial tax, but it was a tax on employees. So in one house, you could have 5 people living there. Each member paid their portion of a tax, despite paying taxes on the wages for living in that property that they thought they owned or even paid rent. Each member paid money. Everybody was up in arms, Taylor. So they went on the streets. They went, oh, we've gone a bit too far here. Let's repackage it. It's the same act, but it's just back on the building. Hooray, we've all won something. Well, no, you're just paying a tax that's still commercial, that doesn't apply, but you've won something. So this is the foundational thing. So if he doesn't repeal that, these can't learn. You know what I mean? I think the best lesson to learn is the Bank of International Settlements. I mean, you've mentioned that so many times, how corrupt that is and what that actually controls, which is, again, what you say, Trump is, against, and he's demolishing it. Yet they're all still beneficial here. So that's interesting. What's your take on it, Alex?
My take on this is basically that it's clear that politically speaking, there's a correct order. So I think the healthiest way, if you're going to take Taylor's paradigm, the healthiest way to view Trump is as a sleeper cell who was put in there, who was being prepared for a long time before he came to office, and that essentially, when that's the case, if it's correct, there have usually been a bunch of strategies that have been developed, because if you just put somebody in, they can be like a fish out of water. They don't have the experience of having been in government, and it's never the same when you're in opposition or you're somebody on the outside as to when you get in control of the machinery of government. So there needs to be a careful plan which is expedited over time and in stages, because if you don't do it like that, there's so many pitfalls. You've got to think smarter than your opponents who've been in control for a certain amount of time. So the way I would parallel it is, I think there's a case to be made for not doing what the video suggests, or not at the beginning, to do other things first. So, for example, the whole Russiagate BS for the first 2 years of his presidency had to be weathered. The first whole 4 years had to be weathered. If he does, because of the Iran war, lose the midterms and control the Senate, the Congress, the House, basically, if they pass away from him, so he had to get some executive orders out to get things rushed through in the first year specifically, and that's why he attacked Iran, to give it enough time, I think, to die down again before the midterms. So all these decisions are not just made because they're the right decision to make. It's at what point do we make this decision, and strategically, is that wise? And the parallel, I'd say, is with media as well, because I touched on it last week. Even though it's not America, it's Australia. And the bird flu nonsense, which I touched on briefly, is just ramping up. So all the time on social media, it's almost like the media organizations are coming out with totally ludicrous headlines. First suspected case of bird flu found in New South Wales. How can the first suspected case be found in New South Wales if it's suspected? So it's like, there's no logic. It's almost like that these news agencies are deliberately putting out absurd statements that everybody can see are illogical. almost so that it would defy belief.
Remember that act that was repealed, that fur doctrine. They can now be biased, and that's where the bias is. That's why, I mean, look at all of a sudden, Trump has just said, no, there's only male and female. And then all these organisations that have made people's lives hell who work there, who wouldn't wear a band on their arm or anything like that, all of a sudden, none of that matters. It was the same when the vaccines came in. All these viruses, when you've got Carrie Mullis saying, well, they can't separate this virus. They're using my PCR test, and it doesn't matter if there's an absolute fraction. It'll just repeat it until you've got enough. So if I've got a fraction of anything in the world, I can find it in you and say, I've diagnosed you with this, and you can't do that. Yet the media ran with that. The media said, follow the science. Well, why don't people say, okay, I'll follow the science. I've got questions. What are you going to do about this? But then you get Lisa Nandy, bless her, the useless pudding. She's left X because of all the misinformation. You know, she's up.
There'll be less now she's left.
Say again.
There'll be less now that she's left.
But that's just it. I think it's because she's getting a lot of truth on there, and she sees that as abuse. But these people are doing nothing. I keep seeing photographs. Oh, we're walking for Veterans Day. You don't care about them. You're just there for an ham sandwich and a photo opportunity. Then you'll disappear. You know, I've seen Sadiq Khan's deputy mayor or something like that, or one of the ministers for something. They went to a Taylor Swift concert and charged the public. Said, well, it brought a lot of revenue in for the City of London and this, that, and the other, and I'm part of that. So it means that I should really turn up. So I justify spending the public money on that. Well, what about this trip to China? Well, that had to be done. What about Thailand? You know, you've got all these people that can lie legally, and yet people are going to say, this man's different. I'd seen a mate on Granada TV saying, I weren't going to vote, but I'm going to vote for Labour because Andy Burnham is a nice fella and he's a local lad. What? When is that going to ever affect anything? Now he's the one which, I want your opinion on this one, Alex. What about the King of the North bringing number 10 North? There's going to be a number 10 North. What is that about? It sounds like you could be breaking England up into regions here. It sounds like Andy Burnham saying, we shouldn't have left Europe, which is what he's saying. And now he's being asked about these grooming gangs, and he won't interact. He won't speak about it. We had the daddy of the gang being released yesterday or Friday. They can't deport him, Alex. They can't deport him. Pakistan went, we don't want him. He gave up his citizenship. He's not coming back here. He's not bringing his crime back to here. So all the do-gooders are going to say, oh, no, that's okay, then we'll let him stay here. Well, that's causing a lot of friction. You've got this citizen vigilante, if you've not heard of it. I think I mentioned it to you. But it's about a fella in this time, based on so-called real events, where he starts going round and punishing people. Now, that mixing with the policing and only at the weekend there's a white lad attacked by 3 black lads. He's put on the floor, and as he gets up, the copper puts him up against the shutters while the black lads go away. So it's like people are being baited. You know, you can actually see it. It's getting to the point where Taylor, remember, with the BLM riots, where you'd get up one morning, walk down the street, and you go, where did that crate of rocks come from? What's that doing there? There's another crate of rocks over there, and then there's a massive riot. All the property is all damaged and burnt and gone beyond to the point where it's absolutely desolate. It can't ever function again. It's got to be flattened. That's called destruction capitalism. And the strangest thing of it is the BLM riots were in the neighbourhoods where black people own businesses, put loads of people out of business. Black Lives Matter, they were saying. You know, this is all wrong. It's all mixed up. Yet it's like so many people are distracted. They go, yeah, I know there's everything going on, but if I keep looking here, it'll be okay. Yeah, well, your kitchen's on fire. Yeah, but I'm in the living room. It's not got to me yet. How long does that Stockholm syndrome, how long does it hold? What does it take?
It holds for as long as the deranged ecologies are in place, and they're entrenched. What you were saying about Burnham as well. Originally, what used to happen was, before you had superstate like the EU, you had individual units who could vote once originally 4 years. Now it's every 5 years. They've reduced that as well to change the government. And so what they've done, they've just moved everything up a tier. They want to move to regionalism, where people in the localities relate to the regions but have very little power. And then you bypass the nation state and you go straight to basically what they've been doing in the UN for a while with Sustainable Development Goals. You get a European superstate, a quango, like the UN, and they have direct interface with the regions. And so that's like scaling up on a transformer. It's like an individual has some accountability with a national government, but a region has no accountability with a superstate because a superstate is transnational, and a region just can't get the traction that an individual can. A region can't vote to get the superstate out. So all it's doing, this redistributing, this, number 10 of the North, yes, it does support regionalism. It's gimmicky to try and make it seem as if historic inequalities between the North and the South are going to be dealt with, that Labour has come back to his roots and understood what the crisis of culture is. It's all stalling for time, while things become more entrenched in Burnham's communist agenda, because that's what he is. Things will get worse. But on that media point, that we were making before about H5N1, I wanted to come back to Taylor again, is that some of these headlines, it's not just that they've got like loads of control over the people. It's the fact that now some of the media organisations seem to be saying things that are so absurd that they're totally unbelievable and that no person could believe them. And that makes me wonder, are these news agencies actually on some level operating? I'm not saying like as white hats, but has something happened there where they've been given directives to say utterly ludicrous things? For example, cancer virus. I mean, for a start, they told us with cancer that it could only be transmitted through close contact with rat or mouse urine or feces. Then we're told that people on a cruise ship again noticed the MO is exactly what happened with COVID, quarantining somebody on a cruise ship. So it's like somebody saying, oh, we're doing the same thing again. We couldn't have been creative and done it at holiday resorts. No, we're going to use the cruise ship again. And then we're going to make it so absurd. We're going to make it so absurd, that we're going to get people to go to a rubbish dump in South America to expose themselves to 2 rats on a rubbish dump, to get Hansen virus, bring it back to the ship, even though it's not transmissible human to human. And then imagine that somehow there's a risk that passing those rats to those humans that went to the rubbish dump on a cruise, that they can then pass it on to the whole ship that has to be quarantined. I mean, it's so ludicrous as to be unbelievable. Then Ebola comes out straight after. Then monkeypox gets a mention again. Then H5N1 has come, and they show you a photograph of a petrel, and it's a stick and a dead bird. And now there are 6 in the whole of Australia. So we might have to be careful and cull all your chickens. I mean, it's so ludicrous. It's so ludicrous, and the words that they use are so ludicrous. It's almost unbelievable that these news agencies could put those reports out. I could hear Taylor before saying exactly. So, what are your thoughts on that, Taylor?
Exactly. That's what I've been saying for at least a year now. Is that the mainstream media has been commandeered by the white hats, by the Q team. And this isn't just the United States. This is worldwide. This is a worldwide operation. The whole point of making the mainstream media continue to put out this leftist garbage is to expose itself, so that way that as many people as humanly possible in the public, not just in America but also worldwide, abandon the mainstream, the legacy media. I'm just going to call it the legacy media.
Mhm.
And turn to alternative sources and get them to think outside of the box. That's and that's exactly why these agencies continue to put out such absurd things. It's also the same reason why we have people.
Alex, they used to call that back in the day. They used to call that investigative journalism, didn't they?
And you know,
Yeah.
it's the same. Hold on, I'm going to bring this into another point. So this is also the same. You know, this is also the same reason for people like AOC and Ilhan Omar, Mondani of New York, etc., etc., etc. Their purpose, and I've been saying this for a long time now, is that they're actors. They even have IMBD profiles. Is that the whole point of them is to flaunt the Democrat Marxism for the public, because the whole point of the Democrat Party going back decades is that they would take the advice of what's his face, who said, you know, basically clean your clothes, you know, put on a suit, shave your beard, and then get into politics. Essentially, I forget the guy's name, the one that Bill Clinton looks up to. It's like basically Rules for Radicals. That's the one. Rules for Radicals.
Oh, Saul Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky, yes, that's the one. Essentially, essentially the idea is that you know when you're running for elections, you mouth off some conservative slogans and some common sense stuff, and then when you get in, that's when you go and do the full communist crap. That's what Bill Clinton did in the 90s. He was he would go down south and then talk about Jesus, and go to get in front of churches and stuff like that, looking like a good old Southern boy. But then as soon as he got into office in 93 and 94, he went hardcore Marxist left, to the point of where it even sparked a conservative revolution in the country that, for the first time, the Republicans took back the House in 95 and 94 for the first time since, I think, the early 50s. So there's that. And, this also brings it back to the fake Biden years. The whole point of the fake Biden years, as I've said many times before, is that you have to piss people off by showing them exactly just what the deep state had planned for them, and exactly just how absurd all these things are. It's like when people say, why is it that this trans agenda is being shoved down our throat? Why is the LGBT stuff being shoved down our throat, despite the fact that it's only like a couple of percentages of the population that even endorse that crap? Well, the reason is because if you shove that crap in people's faces, it pisses them off. And that's the whole point. You get people mad, and it creates discussion. It creates it creates feedback. Yeah, and that's exactly why
it took them a while, man.
Well, we've gone through generations and generations of brainwashing. So it's not something that gets solved overnight. And that's exactly why we had to go through the fake Biden years, and why we still have cities like New York and Seattle that still have to go through this crap, because their populations haven't are still have not understood just exactly how evil these things are.
Children are taught that they can be a dog. They can identify as a dog. That's being taught. That to me did come overnight, and you think, how did that bypass all logic? And it's about being inclusive. Why do we see women all involved in these factions? Because women are naturally nurturing and caring, and they want to include everybody. How can we make everybody happy? Whereas if a man's the same question, it's about logic. It's about logic with a man, and that's why it's so different. This is why it changes dynamics when you put women on frontline action for military, for police. It changes them. It's not whether they can or they can't do the job, but like if you're a firefighter and you go into a building and there's a 20-stone bloke passed out and you've got to get him out of there, and you're a 5'6" woman, what's the chances? What's the chances of that for both of you? So is it better that there's a 25-stone muscle-bound bloke picking this lad up? We don't know the requirements, because everything got lowered. The prison service, the standards had all been lowered, where nearly enough anybody could get a job there. As I said, there's immigrants that are being told if they do 2 years in the job, they'll get automatic citizenship. So is that helping people and being considerate and being loving, or is that putting an environment into danger? Of course it is. But it's interesting you brought. I mean, one thing about the monkeypox you brought up, Alex, that outbreak that you're talking about, again, that's passed on by sexual intercourse. Well, who had sex with a monkey? Where does it come from? If that's the case,
brings you back to the AIDS. Brings you back to the so-called AIDS epidemic.
Yes, well, we now know that Fauci was involved with that, with medication. We've got so much evidence, and you can access it all because of the internet. This is why ignorance is not an excuse anymore. It's a choice. So,
and that's exactly the whole reason that the military, because remember, the military created the internet. It was created with military technology. That's the whole reason they created the internet in the first place, was for this Q operation, so they could because if they couldn't bypass the media, there was no chance that this operation was going to get off the ground. So that's the whole reason they created the internet, to be able to circumvent these things. And obviously the deep state has made use of it themselves. But the point is that the whole reason for the internet was for this purpose, to circumvent the legacy media. Because without that, there's no getting out of this. Let's be real here. So,
well, I didn't know Tim Berners-Lee was military.
I don't know his specific background, but the technology that was created for the internet came from the military. So whether somebody was a front man or somebody had military connections, I don't know. I'd have to look into his specific background.
Well, but what the thing I always remember is Tim Berners-Lee. They wanted to buy it off him. He patented it, and they wanted to buy it, and he said, "No, I've patented it because it's free for everybody." So whether the military had that technology and he was able to funnel it into an internet that worked, or programs, whatever we want to call it, it was always going to be a double-edged sword. Because you're right, and that's what they wanted to use it for, to bypass it all. But there was always going to be the chance that people can use that to see a bigger picture even. So that's why I'm saying you're coming from the Q. That's why we look at it from our point of view. So, but going back to these vaccines, it was a good segue into the next video.
Just before that, though, Paul, Taylor, can you just reassure me that Bernie Sanders isn't a white hat?
Bernie Sanders, I don't know if it's really him or not. I mean, we could argue that all day. But the point is that someone like him, at this point, I think it's pretty clear what his role in all of this is, and that's to continue pushing people away from the left. I mean, it's like, these legacy Democrats, like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, that it's like they're so out in the open with their they're so out in the open with their leftness. It's just it's to wake people up. Like whether someone is a white hat or and by the way, when I say white hat, I'm not referring to people who are put under submission or who are swapped out. I'm referring to people who their whole job is to serve the operation. Now, Bernie Sanders, specifically, I don't know if it's him or not, like I said, but but it's clear that if it is him, that he's been put under submission and that he's doing his role perfectly, because he's just so much more outwardly Marxist than he was before.
Yeah,
and that's accomplishing the goal.
Okay.
Vaccinations are, in a broad sense, inoculations into the system of weakened or dead parasites. But why? Why would this be done? It depends on what paragraph you're reading. One reason it was believed, introducing a small quantity of parasitic excretions into man is sufficient to give passive immunity. But just a few pages later, it says, parasite symptoms are different in each individual. So now we have a third reason. Parasites are actually put into the vaccinations. So what else is known about parasites in humans? We find out more when we see the extensive studies and capabilities of parasites within humans. Parasite eggs fed to human subjects cause lung problems. Parasite eggs are successfully put into vaccines and injected under the skin. Parasite eggs put into vaccine will turn into larva form and go into the lungs. Nearly all symptoms caused by parasite eggs cannot be diagnosed with any certainty. Children used in experiments with exposure to parasite larvae caused successful fatalities. After introducing parasite eggs into the human body, it can be found everywhere: the brain, eyes, liver, spleen, kidney, lungs, bones, nervous system, beneath the skin, everywhere. Parasite eggs turn into larvae and cause death through pneumonia. Appendicitis is the result of damage done by parasites. Inflammation in the body is due to presence of parasites. The presence of parasites gives rise to cysts and the formation of tumor-like growths. Parasites can cause excitability in the sexual organs, causing masturbation in younger children. If too many eggs are given, the liver becomes changed and the host will die within 2 weeks. This test was done on mice, dogs, and children. My husband and I were able to obtain a vial of tetanus vaccine. In this vial, we made 24 pools and examined the liquid contents under magnification. 21 of the 24 pools, we saw a variety of toxins, including undetermined parasite eggs, skin material, lime rod material, algae, and fungus, and encapsulated toxic formations. Only 3 of the 24 vaccine pools had clean bacterial indicators. This explains how one vaccine vial can give different results.
As Jesse Peterson once said, what the? That's mind-blowing. That really is mind-blowing. Warp speed, Taylor.
Was that in a federal court?
I don't know what inquiry it is. There's that many going on. To be honest, Taylor, I'm not quite sure where some of the reels are coming from, because we've got so many inquiries going on in this country. Some people are ignoring them, and the mainstream media certainly is. So you're right in the fact that the mainstream media, there's a spotlight on our media for how they're reporting. You know, it's but we have got these breakthrough media channels that, you know, they're just a little bit different, so they're really telling the truth. But I think if you don't actually go into it and avidly look for yourself, then I think you can be easily swayed along with the Pied Piper. So go on, what's your take on that, mate?
Well, it's important that that stuff with the vaccine agenda, you know, the health industrial complex, or the vaccine industrial complexes, you know, is probably a good way to call it. In that, you know, people are learning this, and this is probably one of the things. This is probably, actually no, I would say this is probably the thing that the public has become the most red-pilled on. Is everything to do with the vaccine agenda, and with the so-called viruses that pop up out of nowhere and that get spread through the mainstream media. You know, it's like you were talking about before with the hantavirus and the bird flu and all this other crap. And it's like, you know, you can even look on social media when these things were gaining traction. It's like nobody was believing this crap. The majority of the public don't, you know, just say, nah, we're not falling for this again. Because, you know, for better or worse, COVID really did help to wake a lot of people up. And, you know, I think I said this last week, that that I've come to believe that the White Hats did have a hand in some of the COVID propaganda, and as in like pushing out some of the most absurd stuff that came out from 2020, like, you know, the dancing videos of the nurses, or the advertisements of, oh, if you get the shot, you get a free cheeseburger, you get free fries and stuff like that. You know, just this absurd, over the top nonsense that clearly any sensible
brought customers in, mate. It brought customers in for it. I know people who were saying they got free donuts.
Yes, but
It
again,
was mad.
that's yes, it is. But again, that was only this. This was back when the public was still completely brainwashed to the fact that, hey, the health industry loves to just create these fictional ideas of viruses and stuff out of nowhere in order to not only make money, but more importantly to fill you with stuff that is harmful to you. So it creates this never-ending cycle. And now people,
Customers,
unfortunately,
it creates customers.
yeah, and unfortunately, it's taken a lot of sacrifices, it's taken a lot of hard work, but the majority of the public, you can see now, even in other countries, not just the United States, I've come to realize this whole thing is just one big scam job. So, this is why you have so many people wanting Fauci to get to get arrested. Now, if you ask me, Fauci and Birx are long gone, long dead, or in Gitmo. You can clearly tell that just by looking at them. But regardless, that's not the point. People want to see their public arrests, them, and Bill Gates, because of everything that happened in 2020. But it's just like the Epstein situation. There's certain stuff has to happen first, and hopefully by the end of all this, it won't just be COVID that will be exposed, but the entire health and vaccine and industrial complex will hopefully be exposed. So that people will stop thinking they need to take their newborn babies to the doctors to get like 50 damn shots before they're even allowed to go home with you, let alone to go to school for the first time. So that's my hope on that.
Yeah. What's your take on it, Alex? Because I think we've spoken about it before, that the amount of studies that all these illnesses and diseases all seem to be parasite related.
Yeah, I heard a while ago that research that was talking about cancer relates to fungus, cancer relates to parasites. Parasites are perfect sleeper cells, aren't they? And so, maybe people need to get on that black walnut oil or whatever it is, and do the parasite cleansing. But do you remember that fenbendazole? I mean, that was one of the things that's really interesting, isn't it? That they tried to ban it, but fenbendazole was having these great results, but it was only being given to horses, and they were saying, "Oh, it's risky."
Well, that was hydroxychloroquine as well. They both related them to horse medication. Yeah, it's used all the time, but mainstream media again said that. Again, that doctrine's been removed. They can be biased. They can't say, "Oh, but it helps so many." They're only giving us the bad bits and influencing people en masse about just the bad bits. 30,000 deaths this year of COVID. Yeah, but they die every year of flu. There's no flu deaths. They're all COVID. Where's the flu deaths? Well, I don't know, but there's 30,000 COVID. So 30,000 flu deaths are not happening, but there's COVID deaths. And you think, come on, how can you not see this? To the point where people are being forced to wear PPE that is not fit for purpose, and yet, don't worry, you can wear it under your chin. That's being enforced by management. People were forced to get vaccines. They'll be able to say, "No, you weren't." "Yeah, but I couldn't work here." "Yeah, but we gave you the choice. You could have not had the vaccine and left your job." It's ridiculous what they've got away with over the last 5 years, yet there's no accountability. Andrew Bridgen talked about this court case with Matt Hancock over it. What's happening? I know that court cases will be stretched out and twisted and this and that. Is it all theatre? It certainly seems it, Paul.
Yeah.
I can tell you this much. Well, hold on. Let me just say. I can tell you this much. You're not going to see accountability for these stuff in a public civilian court. That's just not going to happen. Even if the justice system has been let's say captured, at the end of the day, the point is that we also have to expose the justice system for how evil it is. So this is just my hypothesis, but my hypothesis is that what they're going to do is that these people, whether it's their imposters or not, are going to be tried in military courts, because in military courts there's no such thing as immunity. There's no such thing as what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? Where after a certain amount of time has passed, the crime is forgiven.
Statute barred.
Say again.
Statute barred.
Oh yeah, statute of limitations. Yeah. None of that crap exists in military tribunal courts. So that's just my theory, because again, you're not gonna you can't just not expose the corruption of the justice system, because that's one of the key things that has caused all this mess to begin with. So,
well, you've still got your common law criminal courts. You don't actually need military, but you say that military have already taken over control of that country on the foundational side of it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've been in this exposure phase, and the accountability is something that we've all been waiting for probably too long now at this point. I'm not going to lie. I think that's we need accountability now. But regardless, I'm not the one in charge. So I'm just telling you how it is, that that we're not going to see civilian courts like your regular courts that you have down the street tribunaling, sentencing Anthony, Tony Fauci or Bill Gates or Bill Clinton or anyone or the king of England, because for the King of England it should be pretty obvious, because the crown owns the justice system. They own the court system, so you can't have you
seen the court case in the Netherlands regarding Bill Gates?
No, actually I haven't.
Yeah, have a look into that. You'll see that. Have a look into that.
And by the way, one last thing about that I just want to mention is that I do wonder if Carrie Mullis wasn't taking under what's it called, military protection, witness protection program, because at that,
unless he's been sorry mate, unless he's been hidden away.
That's what I mean. It's possible they could have put him in a witness protection program, like people speculate they did with JFK Jr. And I'm not endorsing that. I'm not saying whether it's true or not. But if hypothetically speaking, it is true that JFK Jr. is under witness protection, hidden away from the public, then theoretically it should be possible for Carrie Mullis, because this was 2019. So, but if he is dead, if he is actually dead and it's true, then we definitely should have his body examined, because there's no way that was just some sudden death. He's in that book I mentioned to you guys before called Dig 'Em Up by Mike King. 40 famous cases of people just dying suddenly when they become an inconvenience to the cabal and their agenda, and Carrie Mullis is one of them. So, just wanted to throw that out there. John McCaffrey was another one. Oh, Cappy, yeah, that's another one. Yeah, no, he was obviously murdered. That was like Tom Hanks was. Oh, oh my goodness! I'm hoping Tom Hanks gets exposed and get publicly arrested.
I saw an article about Tom Hanks where he lives on this island. There's no extradition, but apparently that's being changed, so he may have to face extradition charges. So that'll be interesting to people who I know who said Tom Hanks wouldn't do things like that because he's a lovely man. So that'll be interesting.
Tom Hanks is one of the worst ones.
Alex, what was your take on that?
On which bit?
Well, you were just gonna talk about the parasites and that.
I don't really have a great amount of knowledge. I mean, if you think about it, there's so many areas now that are up in the air, and I've not for quite some time. I see things come through on the feed. I see little bits here and there, but I don't deep dive any of it because I see it all as part of a bigger charade. So, I'm predominantly looking at theological stuff and writing and trying to diagnose what the problem is in the culture that, and as I say, I'm focused on lost ecology. Why is it that we're not able to sustain, a form of life that doesn't become deranged? Why does it keep degrading, and how do we put it right? So I see all these other things that are happening as symptoms of a more central malaise. And, for a long time, I've been quite convinced that you need to address the root cause of the problem, identifying not just what it appears to be, but it's like tentacles, isn't it, of an octopus. There are many different tentacles, and I think you need to identify each tentacle and put them off so that they've no longer got a chokehold on people. And then when you've done that, you then need to be able to find a way of reconstructing an ecology. So for me, I'm looking at how could you ecologically transplant? So like with Judaism, when Christianity moved away, and it lost the festivals, it lost a lot of the formation ecology that Judaism had. Judaism wasn't just a religion that, had a particular view on laws and so on. It had a well-formed ecological system for propagating faith, whether it's the phylacteries, mezuzahs, inscribing on the lintels and doorposts. There was an entrenched ecology that everybody followed, which retained remembrance of God, and that got lost when the Gentile church mission kicked in, and then obviously the Jerusalem church gradually died out over the first few centuries. So we lost something, and we've struggled to retrieve it. And I think, for me, all the things that we see, whether it be vaccines or duplicity from media, or people being dumb enough to believe, people can be as dumb as rocks, and it's not just because they're stupid, like they've got a low IQ. It's because they've been trained into accepting a counterfeit version of what it is to be alive. Think about what a privilege it is, what a gift it is to actually be conscious, to be alive, to have a body, to be able to move around in your body if you don't have a disability and use your body. All the things you can do with it as a gift, and yet people, they neglect it. They become unusually passive. They don't seem to have a proactive view about life, and they become passengers. I always used to, when I worked in mental health, one of the things I used to say to people who'd been chronically depressed and in the system for a long time was, to say to them, it's like you've been a passenger in a car, and the goal is to become the driver, but you've been a passenger for so long. Did you ever know how to drive? Whether you did or you didn't, you're either going to have to relearn or learn for the first time, so that you can make the decisions about where the car that is your life goes. Because if you don't do that, you're always waiting for the next bus. You're always checking the timetables. When's the next facilitator coming along? Where do I have to go in order to, what if it rains? I've got to get here. It's going to be awkward. You don't have the autonomy to be able to say, right, I want to go here. This is what I'm doing. I've got a car here and I can drive. So I've got skills to be able to get myself from A to B. That is something that comes with a dynamic life. When people can't drive, it might seem like a trivial thing, but it vastly curtails their options in life when they lose that, not just the freedom and independence in abstract terms, but the concrete ability to get from A to B, travel long distances. It's huge. So derangement of ecology connects to de-skilling as well. And when you become de-skilled, you tend to seek a crutch to make up for that which you can't do yourself. That leads to codependent relationships, over-reliance on government, the nanny state. When you empower people and you give them the power and you have government small g, you give people the capacity to identify their own skills, their own creativity, to step forward with confidence, to express that in the world. And if you do the opposite of that, you shut all that down and you make people passive and you make them believe in authority, and then you reap what you sow. So to me, I'm always going to be looking more peripherally at the things that are happening in the world as symptoms of a deeper malaise, and it's the deeper malaise I'll keep digging into.
Indeed. Have you got anything coming up this week, Taylor? I know you've done quite a bit last week. What have you got on your agenda this week?
More of the same. I'm trying to build up my I'm always trying to build up my base on
come a bit closer to the mic, mate.
Oh, sorry. Is this better?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I'm always trying to build up my my audience on Rumble, trying to upload stuff and interact in chats in order to get people interested. And I'm getting I'm getting new followers almost every day, which is really nice. I'm at like 300. I'm close to 400 now. So
Good. Good.
although I don't know how many of them are actually active, because usually whenever I stream, I only get like a few people watching, like not even 10. So
Yeah, but it might be a different time zones, like you said.
yeah, it's possible. I know that we're coming up close to the end here, but there is one story that I want to tackle real quick, that I feel like that, you know, that when I saw it, it kind of just ringed with me a little bit and gave me a little bit of a nice feeling, where it's like, oh yes. Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick, and I'm gonna read from an article, and then talk about it a little bit, because this is something that I always felt was this is something that I liked. So okay, so let's see right here. Israeli false flagger who screwed Mike King nabbed by Q boys. Michael Kadar. You probably haven't heard about this story. Have you?
No.
Okay, so this is this isn't exactly a major story, but it's a good one. So I'm just going to read a bit here. As we continue to wage this struggle together to have my books reinstated on Amazon/Kindle, yeah, because unfortunately Mike here, his Amazon page got removed about a week or two ago because of some asshat that was quote unquote disturbed by his content, and then it got flagged by and so he flagged it, and Amazon ended up removing it. My guess is it was probably not a real person, but rather a bot, because, you know, unfortunately we're still dealing with that problem. If you ask me, Amazon is completely under control now. They allow pretty much everything on there nowadays. But the point is, you know, you still have these low-level operatives that still want to be asshats and remove things. So, you know, it is what it is. But continuing, there are some other wonderful news to report. Ironically, this recent gem was only discovered while I was putting together a chronological presentation of my on-again/off-again troubles with the publishing giant. Let's flash back to 2017. It's the early days of Trump 45, a time when the internet is free of censorship. Here's a sequence of events. I'm gonna be flat out right here. I hard disagree with that idea that the internet was free of censorship before 2017. It wasn't as bad, but it wasn't exactly free either. But continuing, 2013 to early 2017, various Jewish groups organized a pressure campaign aimed at persuading Seattle-based, notice Seattle, that's my backyard, Amazon to remove books which deny the Holocaust. Much to their dismay and disappointment, Jeff Bezos, a big deep stater in his own right, ignores the requests. It makes sense that he would ignore the request, because he's big enough in his own right that, you know, he wouldn't want to remove the books, not because he thinks that, not because he's for free speech, but because he knows that it's going to make him money, and that's what people like him care about. So yeah. 2016 to early 2017, concurrent with increasing and openly expressed protesting over Holocaust denial books, a wave of bomb threats, ultimately totally 2,000 in total, all are called into Jewish community centers across the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. I'm going to be honest. I don't personally remember this myself. I wasn't awake at the time, so I'm not going to remember something like this. And also, give me a second.
Sorry, what? His mum's turned his internet off.
Okay. My bad. Thought I heard something. Anyway.
Definitely your bad.
Oh, boy. Anyway, continuing. Yeah. February 21st, 2017. Bomb threats reached reached such a pitch of media hysteria that President Trump, after dragging his feet, is compelled to openly condemn them and vow to find the perpetrators. During an interview on CNN, Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat of New York, said that Trump supporters of Donald Trump were responsible for the threats. Of course, this was early on in Trump's first term, so, you know, they didn't have control back then. So you still have this crap going on. February 21st, 2017. Same day. In the shadow of Amazon headquarters in Seattle, again, that's my backyard, basically, 2 buildings are defaced with threatening anti-Semitic graffiti. Calls for Amazon to dump its Holocaust denial books intensify. February 24th, Israel's Holocaust Museum gets in on the PSYOP and openly asks that Amazon pull all the offending books, of course. Late February / early March 2017, 3 Jewish cemeteries are vandalized across the United States. Major media coverage is given, and politicians of all stripes begin shrieking against anti-Semitism. March 7th. Following discussions with Jewish leaders and threats of boycotts, Amazon removes about 20 of 25 titles which deny the Holocaust. The best-selling World War II book, The Bad War, by your favorite historian here, is one of them. Such an honor. In 2018, my entire account, about 25 books at the time, was Holocausted. March 10th, just for good measure, after the fact, a Seattle synagogue is vandalized with Holocaust denial graffiti. The word is written with a $sign instead of an S, like I always do. Holocaust. Oh man, it's just. I think it should be pretty clear what all this was about without me even having to go into detail. Oh,
You've
boy.
not got time to go into detail, mate. What was the point to that, though? Sum it up.
So essentially, the Jewish Zionist brigade, they didn't like the fact that Jeff Bezos was allowing these so-called Holocaust denial books on his platform, and or rather World War II truth books in general on his platform, because they were becoming popular. They were selling out really fast, and a lot of people were reading them. And this is the time when World War II truth was starting to become more popular, like with The Greatest Story Never Told and Europa and stuff like that. So, and by the way, those documentaries took a lot of their information from Mike King's book, The Bad War, released in 2013, 2014. Regardless, though, so what they did was they cooked up some big scare, saying that, all these anti-Semites, Holocaust denials, they're defiling Jewish cemeteries. And so they basically, and then the mainstream media pushes it, which essentially forces Bezos to crack down on Amazon, to crack down on these so-called Holocaust denial books and remove a whole bunch of them. And then later on, as it turns out, on the following year, it turns out that the so-called person that was doing this and making the bomb threats around the country, he was in Israel. He was an Israeli Jew. What a surprise. Wow. Everyone clap your hands. Oh my goodness. Yep. So the whole thing was essentially just a big propaganda push to force Jeff Bezos to remove this stuff from Amazon. Anyway, recently, I think it was like a week ago, this person was extradited from Israel to the United States to serve prison time. Now, I'm sure you know this already, that nobody ever gets extradited from Israel. It's always to, because that's the criminal state where all the child predators and gangbangers and all these go. So somebody's extradited from Israel after he supposedly spent already 17 years in jail. By the way, that number 17. Or no, not 17, 7, my bad. It's like, okay, it's pretty damn obvious what happened here. This guy was extradited. He fled to Holland, I believe it was. But then he from Israel to Holland, but then he was extradited here back to the United States. The reason why I bring this story up is because this is something, this is a bigger thing. How these big cabal agents would use these little scare events that they themselves cook up in order to essentially say, hey, look, you guys need to crack down on so-called anti-Semitism or on Sandy Hook truth, like they did to Alex Jones back in the day, or insert topic here. So, or like they did in the 90s when the militia groups were popping up and people were becoming pro-gun and all that. And then they had Oklahoma City happen and they blamed it on so-called right-wing extremists and militia groups. So, yeah, it's just a bigger thing where
I certainly think there's a possibility of a false flag coming over here in several places around the world. I mean, you've had shootings just recently again in the States, but you can feel it. You can feel that there's something being engineered, and you can also feel that there's people who are willing to take the bait. Well, do you want to give us your details of what you're doing and where they can find you, and then hang about in the green room so we can have a chat after the show before we go off?
All right, sounds good. Okay, yeah. So my Rumble is the Raconteurs Report. It's the same thing as my YouTube and my Twitter. They're all the same name. It's all one word, so no spaces. And I usually only upload on my Rumble page because YouTube doesn't like me. Surprise, surprise. And my Gmail is chippyskippy@gmail.com. If you want to get to me directly, either use that or my Twitter account. So, and I usually do live streams. I usually do like watch parties and or audiobooks and stuff like that. So, if you're into that, check it out. I try to produce some good information. And also for you guys living in the UK, I mentioned this to you guys in the Facebook chat that there's this good channel you should check out on Rumble called Patriots Across the Pond, which talks about some, they're patriots in the UK that talk about some the anon Q and all that stuff. I feel like you guys, everyone here in the UK might could get a lot of useful information out of this guy.
Okay, mate. Thanks for coming on, mate, and sharing your time with us. We appreciate it.
And let me just mention one more thing, in that I'm actually going to be having an interview this Wednesday with a popular streamer on Rumble called Beer at the Parade at noon my time. Oh, actually, well, it's not going to be live streamed. I'm going to be posting it on my Rumble. So, I'm going to do my first ever interview in a long time. So, wish me luck.
No worries. Have a good one, mate.
Good luck.
Yeah. God bless, Paul.
Yeah, God bless, guys.
In summing up, mate,
I don't think there's anything specifically that I would sum up. I would probably just venture a little anecdote that, from my experience. Back end of last year, I had a few challenges in my life that began a process of reevaluation, which I'm still in. And it's quite interesting to document or chart your own process from the inside. And for me, in order to do that, I needed to procure a large amount of solitude. And I suspect if you we've looked at you've done a few young videos in recent months. He argues that it's the only way really for a person to have a deeper confrontation with herself. And although that doesn't seem to get much traction as an explicit Christian theme, because, Christian theology of faith is outward looking. It looks at Jesus and God and says, this is the reality, this is the truth, this is the story arc. Respond to it. This is one of the reasons why our ecologies have become deranged, because we've been looking outward. So we know we get the crude version of the kingdom is within you in a way that we see, where people prioritize, the inspiration of the Holy Spirit to basically justify any experience that they have, and not to ground it in deeper truth. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be outward looking in terms of looking to Christ and God as the center. But when you do that in a particular way, in a way that says, look, the whole point is to deliver these tracts and get people to believe external truths, it can cut people off from looking more deeply at themselves. I've always been an introspective person. I've always been a thinker, and I've always tried to take responsibility for my life, and yet there were still things I was missing because I didn't take the time. I didn't create enough space for solitude to allow certain things that I was running away from to arise to the forefront of consciousness. And a lot of the time with people, it's because they've got buried pain, they're running away from stuff, but never really realised that they were. And it's amazing how many deranged decisions that you make when you're doing that, because often you're in a fear-based mentality without realising it. You're reacting to a stimulus. You're always on the run, and there's a volatility, even though you might be a calm person. And the reason I'm saying this, I think, is that we always look at the external events, the things that are happening, and there's an endless litany of them. Every week, there will be vastly different ones, and yet they're all part of a very similar choreography. So I just wanted to make the point for people to remember that through all of that stuff that can be incredibly confusing, like you are on the open ocean in a storm and just on a raft, you know, to remember that, you know, if you are looking for something deeper, you're looking for maybe even God or Christ, you ultimately have to find peace in the heart of the storm from your own restless seas that have been there probably from the beginning, from being very young. So I'd encourage people to take the time, because now is the time in this world that we're living in now. Take some time out if you can to reflect, go deeper with yourself, and ask yourself, you know, what is the point of my existence? Am I actually happy doing what I'm doing? Am I living my life on autopilot? Have I got people around me who perhaps shouldn't even be around me, but I've just always entertained them because it's been habit, like many other things in my life, like going to work or waiting for the weekend or doing this on a certain day, attending such a thing, going to raves, whatever it is. These things that tend to become the scaffolding of our lives, you know, it's not just questioning our mistakes and our assumptions, it's questioning the very way we live our lives. If we don't get beneath that level in some way, we will lead a superficial existence. And I can only say that by having gone down the path I've gone down, in especially in recent months, it forces you to look at things that you might not want to, and for things to arise that enable you to completely reframe your perspective. And that gives you the best prospect, I think, to take ownership of your life and take it down the path that is actually about you and what you want, to be an authentic and real person rather than just following conventions. Because we come back time and time again, you opened with that again, that why do we just follow these conventions? Well, it's not because the conventions are out there. It's because something in us finds it more convenient to follow convention than actually look deeper into what might be troubling our soul.
That's the point. Not looking into ourselves and build everything on a false foundation and then wonder why everything's collapsing. And I think that was the point at the start of the show. Thanks to everybody that managed to sit through live, especially with two rather small football matches going on and pubs being populated today. So thank you for being here. It's been a good discussion. Not the chat box wasn't aflame tonight. So, you know, questions were maybe being that raised last week. Maybe people are thinking about it, because at the end of the day, we can't find this remedy from our own strengths and our own witness. We've got to look somewhere else, and there is a way, and it's the only one. Right, God bless, guys. See you next week.
Yeah. See you later.
The most dangerous lie does not always sound hateful. Sometimes it sounds kind. That is what people miss. Not every gentle voice is telling the truth. Not every soft word is mercy. Not every message of acceptance comes from God. Because false compassion does not heal the wound. It protects what is poisoning it. It tells the addict, you are not in bondage. It tells the angry, you are just being authentic. It tells the bitter, you are protecting yourself. It tells the proud, you deserve to be worshipped. It tells the sinner, do not repent, just rename it. That is how evil survives in a culture. It stops looking evil. It learns the language of care, safety, healing, inclusion, protection, freedom. But if compassion removes truth, it becomes a leash. If mercy removes repentance, it becomes permission. If love refuses correction, it becomes agreement with death. Jesus was full of mercy, but his mercy never protected sin. He healed and said, sin no more. He forgave and called people to follow him. He fed the hungry and still rebuked false shepherds. He touched the broken and still exposed hypocrisy. Because true mercy does not leave the poison in the wound. It cleans it out, even when it hurts. That is why the world hates real correction. Because correction breaks the spell. Correction says, this thing you are defending is killing you. And the system does not want that said. The system wants sin renamed, packaged, protected, legalized, celebrated, then sold back to you as compassion. But Scripture says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. So test the kindness, test the fruit, test the foundation, because the lie that destroys a generation may not come screaming with hatred. It may come smiling, calling itself love.
Rising on a strange summer day, 8 in the morning, the sea is lost in the gray. A digital sky with a few streets thrown between, while they plan out tomorrow behind a glowing screen. They talk of a thunderstorm that rumbles in sighs, but nothing ever breaks from these heavy June skies. Where do we find the truth in the middle of the spin, when the system's unlocked and the theater takes them in? It's not in the building, it's not in the creed, it's the kingdom of God and the ground that we need. Turn the page to the air, let the narrative split. Look for the foundation where the true lights are lit. They keep singing the scores from the same old hymn sheet, from the halls of London down to every local street. A political game where the hands are always tied, promising a rescue while the broken floor slides. They manipulate the narrative to harvest your mind, leaving decoy trails for the scattered to find. Where do we find the truth in conviction breaks through, and suddenly you see what you're called to do. Be careful where you sit, keep an eye on the shore. Put your trust in the relationship and wonder no more. We must be born again, the kingdom within you. Relationship with the Father, whilst ordering tea for two. Ah.